Hello everyone. Today we're going to be reading one of the first book of the Morbid Tales by Zachary Miller, The Shopkeep. Be wary of lights gone dim and childlike whispers of how do you do, because once you see them, they see you. We can still back out of this. Cindy, please. I implored my friend to see a reason, but she had already made up her mind. Cindy had a wire cutter in her hand and had made a hole in the back alley fence. If there was a worse setting for two 17-year-old girls to find themselves in, I didn't know what it was. Stop being such a sissy, Rachel, Cindy smiled from the other side of the fence. I kind of resented her and kind of envied her. She had balls. I don't know if balls are the right term I'm using here. Guts? Jones? But she had them nonetheless. She was the kind of person you look up to because they were oh so cool with their not give a crap attitude and their bright outlook on life. I was relatively meek, but daring enough to be out with Cindy on her latest exploit. Not that there wasn't anything in it for me. I was promised my fair share of the money, $500. It was not much. Hell, for the heist we were about to pull, we were being paid peanuts in comparison. The day before, Cindy had come to my house after school with a lively face and a prospect on the brink of her lips. She took me to the ballpark that afternoon. It was abandoned, save for the hobo sleeping under one of the pigeon-poop-crusted bleachers. We stayed away from him in a case of eavesdropping and went down to the Diamond. It was a humid morning, as are most mornings in Castle Santos, an indiscernible speck on the vast map of California, a population of 3,000. No one was around in the park, so we were free to talk as we pleased. Cindy took out a can of Budweiser from her backpack. I doubt it had ever been used to store books. I'd seen her take out beer cans, joints, and once, in the week succeeding last year's 4th of July, she had taken out 5 M40 firecrackers. You could kill a man with them. We chucked them in the jungle ravine on the outskirts of the town. I've established, I think, that Cindy was a tomboy, and I liked her for that. She was fun, exciting, and did what I wouldn't dare do. I used to think I'd follow her to the end of the world. She'd asked me to split that beer with her, but I refused on the promise I had yet to have lunch with my mom. And if she smelled the beer stench coming from my breath, she'd give me a hell of a time. Mom was one of those religious Baptist church folks you've watched in Carrie or The Dead Zone. She'd already disapproved of the Pink Floyd poster hanging in my room by saying, "There's no dark side to the moon. God's mercy prevails on both sides, just as it does on Earth. You take the satanic poster down." I had heard from Sister Clarice that if you play those songs on reverse, Satan speaks to you. After having listened to those remarks for most of my life, I'd grown used to it. I took that poster down without any more of an argument. I guess that's why they always called me the golden child at church. I did whatever was asked me just to avoid an argument, so drinking beer was out of the question. "What's up?" I asked, a little worried about her nonchalant behavior. Did her mother or father not get concerned about her? Somehow, I always imagined Cindy to live in a giant mansion all on her own with a whole array of butlers. I'd never been to her house, in reality, to know any better. Got this freelance gig last night on Craigslist. The dude who posted it checks out. He's the real deal and is willing to pay us $1,000 for a small pickup job. Wanna go splitsies? As she had asked me, I, not knowing any better, had accepted. I needed the money. Prom was in a few weeks, and Mom had already put her hands up and blatantly said no to any involvement with prom. I expected nothing else of her. I wanted to go to prom and have just one dance with Zach. Zach Pondicherry had asked me out. So I had said yes to Cindy without knowing what it was. A small pickup job seemed exactly what it sounded like. I didn't know that it would involve something illegal. "Come on, Rachel, baby," Cindy spoke from the other side of the fence. A black alley cat hissed at her and she kicked at it. The cat meowed and ran away with her tail puffed up. That should have been my first warning sign, but I was too nervous to notice. I don't want to anymore, I said. The shop was so damn eerie, I had already made up my mind to not go inside it as soon as I'd seen the storefront. Of course, the place looked like nobody came back here because nobody ever did, or would with a sane mind. A mossy window displayed an assortment of cryptic items. A body of a doll hung with marionette strings. It was a full-size doll, and instead of a face, there was nothing but the smooth bridge of a nose and deep conclaves for eyes. It hung as it had been sentenced to death. A jack-o'-lantern lay on the floor of the window display, and it seemed to be glowing orange without any candle or bulb on the inside. There was a cane with ribs on either side of it. It looked like a medieval torture device. Beneath it, a plaque said the Soul Grappler, circa 1340, used to instigate pain on prisoners of war by plunging it through their mouths. Like I said, creepy stuff. But the name of the shop was a most unwelcoming one, too. Mephisto's Oddities Antique Shop. Mephisto, as in Mephistopheles, I presumed. Didn't the devil have something better to do, like enslaving souls and ruling hell, than to open up a shop in a small California town? I'd never come across the shop before in my life. It is, and as far as I know, still located at the end of Witham Street, a street often deserted and only visited by those heading towards the train station. I'd never seen a train come in or out of town in the last 10 years, ergo the desertedness. The door looked ancient and comically out of place, just like everything else about the shop. And so did the lock on it. But Cindy had come prepared. I might not need that money that bad, but she surely did. She had been freelancing on shady income ever since last year and had developed quite a knack for it. She had the makings of a real entrepreneur. I tried dabbling in earning money online, but there was just too much competition, too many jobs to apply for, and too many skills required to do the jobs. Not everyone had the luck Cindy had, and not all of it was good luck. Are you out of your mind? You said this was a pickup job. I tried to talk some sense into her as a last resort. I had not agreed to breaking and entering, and Cindy knew it. And she had not told me any of the details of the job. She knew how to pull up my strings, and she knew that by the time things would become apparent to me that it would be too late for me to back down. Curse her and her shrewdness. This is a pickup job. We break into the shop, we pick up the flask of Randall Flag from one of the shelves, and we get out. Easy peasy lemon sneezy, she said. She was getting jittery with impatience, but she needed me to see the job through, and that was my only leverage at keeping her at bay. If we get caught, we'll lose our chances of getting into college, I said. It was true. If we got caught, we'd be charged as minors, chided Cindy. Now come on. But even that would be a huge blot on our records and our college applications. I had a 3.6 GPA, and I had studied hard to maintain. With my cheerleading, my grades, and the SATs last month, I was aiming for one of the top 10 colleges in California. If by the end of the semester I managed to get my GPA to a solid 4.0, I might want to apply to Stanford or the University of California. Hey, you listening? Snapped Cindy, pulling me from my thoughts. There's no one here. We'll get in, get out, end of story. And now for the love of God, will you stop being a schmuck and get over here? You want that dress, don't you? That did it for me. There she was again, with her shrewdness and her marionette strings of manipulation. She knew how much I wanted to go to prom. She even knew how big of a crush I had on Zach. And even though I hadn't spoken to him in forever, she knew which dress it was that I'd had my eyes on for a long time. I hesitantly crawled through the hole in the fence and joined my friend. We walked towards the door of the shop, and she shone her flashlight on it. She set her backpack down and studied the metal door for a moment and the bolted lock around it. Reaching into her backpack, she pulled out an extra flashlight and handed it to me. Then she proceeded to pull out something else, a big set of bolt cutters. I come prepared, she grinned and opened them wide. Clank. The chain fell to the ground. and Cindy proceeded to open the metal door with a firm grasp. I, paranoid, looked about to see if someone was watching us. Apart from the alley cat, there was no one. None that I could see, at least. On our way here, we had come across a cop making his rounds on Fulham Street. It was an intersection away. There was no chance that he could have heard all the noise. Even if he did, was he sane enough to saunter down his deserted alley? "Come on," Cindy whispered, stepping inside. The doorway led to a small corridor which was lit by a dim red bulb, like an insidious light. I followed her into the hallway and closed the door behind me, and then we lightly stepped towards the door at the end of the corridor. There was a storage room in one corner of the passage. I shone my light on it and saw nothing unusual. Boxes, and more boxes. Some of them were plagued with a green, moss-like fungus, and they gave off a musty odor. I moved forward hurriedly, not wanting to smell that stench anymore. I thought I saw one of the boxes move a little, but that could have been the trick of the light, or perhaps a small mouse which had found its home in those moldy packages. Cindy had opened the door to the shop and had already moved in without waiting for me. I tiptoed behind her, not wanting to get lost in the maze of long shelves racked claustrophobically like dominoes. She stood looking at them, judging, by the looks of it, how much time it would take her to sift through all the shelves to find that flask of Randy what's-his-name. Why was her client so insistent on having her steal it? If he coveted it that much, why didn't he come into the store and pay for it? I doubted if anything in this shop was more expensive than a couple of $100. It was too dark to decipher anything, so I clicked on my flashlight and tugged at Cindy's sleeve. I was a little unnerved, and the beam of my light flickered on and then off. I shook and tapped the plastic cover over the bulb, and it blinked on. "Careful!" Cindy snapped back over her shoulder at me. "Don't shine it near any windows. Someone will see us. What's this thing we're supposed to steal even look like?" "The guy said it's a gold flask," Cindy said and moved into one of the aisles. I didn't follow her. I did not like this place one bit. It was one of those deceptive places that look small from the outside but are expansive on the inside. The whole room spread out like a giant convention hall with many shelves placed haphazardly. I couldn't help but shake the feeling that something was watching me, something right past the corner. I turned around and shone my flashlight and saw a pair of red eyes. My breath caught, my muscles tensed. My hands shook and my flashlight flickered, making it look like those watchful eyes blinked. I nearly screamed in surprise, but after a moment I registered what I had seen, and came to understand that it was not some demon or ghoul, but a simple Victorian porcelain doll. I don't know why dolls creep people out. They always looked adorable to me. I picked up Annabelle, for that is what the tag underneath it said, and looked at it. Something crept around the corner, something big, cloaked, and fast. I placed the doll back in place and shone my light in the direction of movement. My heart was jackhammering in my chest. I'm not the type of person to imagine things, but I knew that I had seen something move. It had even made a slimy, trailing noise as it had passed. "Cindy," I whispered. Cindy had gotten away from me. Her curiosity and overeager venturing ended up leaving me in the lurch. I wasn't sure exactly where I was in this huge museum-like shop. "What?" she yelled. "Found it?" "I think there's something else in the store," I said, my voice quavering. I turned the corner past a shelf with clown masks, old, cracked ones which had dried up with age and looked like pieced-together mosaics. A dark silhouette jumped in front of my path. "Boo!" Cindy said in a little voice. She was wearing a long white mask like the slasher character from the Scream movie. I would have screamed had I not known Cindy would try to scare me. But I was prepared. Leave it up to her to be up to no good while being up to no good. Just for that, I punched her in the gut. "Oi, not cool," she said, and took the mask off. She placed the flashlight under her chin, like camp scouts do around bonfires when they're about to tell you about the big evil monster from the ravine, and said, "Rachel and Cindy find themselves trapped in the devil's antique shop." "Ooh, you're an idiot." I began to speak, but stopped when I saw the unmistakable slither of a cloak behind Cindy. It did not creep away. Instead, it rose from the floor into a menacing silhouette. In the light of my dim, flickering flashlight, I saw a red pair of eyes underneath those layers of cloth. Cindy turned around and saw the thing for herself. Our 2 flashlights shone on it instead of 1. In that enhanced luminance, I saw it come closer and usher at us with its cumbersome arms. It whispered to us in a slow and hoarse drawl, "Trespassers, intruders, how do you do? It's been some time. We've been waiting for you." I screamed. Cindy screamed. And we ran in the opposite direction, hoping there was no dead end. There wasn't, but there might as well have been. Blocking our path stood another one of those beings. "Come closer," it uttered a deathly rattle. I saw in horror the details of its body. It wore the skin of a human loosely, but underneath it there was nothing but blackness. Whoever had been unlucky enough to break into the store before us now hung slackly over the horrific black mass that approached us. I was reminded, amidst all this frenzy, of a quote I'd read on the internet. "When you don the skin of the beast, the man inside dies." Except here, with these strange, frightful beings, it was the opposite. I had no more time to ponder and philosophize about the nature of these entities. Cindy and I tried to flee to the right, down another aisle, but another creature stepped into our path. With long, pale limbs, this one wore the skin of a young woman pulled tight over its skeleton, as though it didn't fit quite right. The unfortunate face stretched over its head, and etched in her expression was the horror of her death. Her mouth gaped open in a grimace, and between her lips was the sneer of the monster's yellow and black teeth. They stepped toward us, and the reek of mold grew intense. "Who are you?" Cindy said, in trepidation. I was in no mood to indulge in conversation with these nameless horrors. I looked at the top of the shelf and reckoned that I could climb it. But just upon that very moment, an entity, much smaller but nonetheless scarier, appeared on top of the shelf and hissed at us. It wore the skin of a small, mischievous child. A ponytail tied in a blue ribbon hung from the back of its head, playfully bouncing as it climbed down toward us. "The Shopkeep," it whispered in a childlike voice. Fear took a paralyzing hold of me, and so had the monster with the skin of a woman. Its grip was cold and firm. Fear unfroze my limbs, and I kicked at it. It lurched away, and before I could move, it forcibly lunged at me and grabbed hold with pale, spider-like fingers. Dried flesh cracked around his bones as it held my ankle. Cindy grabbed my leg and screamed at it, and we flung backward onto the floor. Even with the threat to the small childlike thing above us, Cindy and I glanced at each other and then up to the shelf. Stuck or not, we both knew our chances were better up there than with these big, hungry creeps. We jumped and grabbed the ledge and clambered up, and I took my flashlight in one hand, and in a moment of brave defiance, I struck the creature above us on its head. The skin tore from his forehead, and before I shrieked out in pain and crawled away, I saw beneath its stolen flesh its own black skin, glistening in what little light there was. We kept climbing. The beings below rushed to grab at our legs with whispers of horrible demands. "Flesh! Flesh! Give it to us!" I thought I heard, only hoping I was wrong, and that this was all a nightmare, some cruel joke. The shelf, unable to bear the weight we pressed against it, toppled and crashed into the next shelf and the next, like dominoes. The shopkeeper her alarm for a moment. I took that opportunity to run towards the back door. In my frenzied state of mind, I assumed that Cindy was following me too. I ran through the red corridor and out of the door, screaming, panting, faltering. I stopped for breath only when I was out from the back alley, and on the front of the street, where there were at least the lights from the street lamps and the red blinking stoplight. I rushed on the ground, regurgitating the remains of the dinner I had earlier. Looking around, I found that Cindy was nowhere to be seen or heard. "Cindy?" I called out, staring into the dark alley, hoping her figure would emerge from the shadows in hopes that she was only a little behind me. But Cindy never came. In despair, I called out her name 3 more times, but was met with silence.
I swear to God, kid, if this is some form of public prank, you'll get arrested for obstruction of justice. I don't care if you're a juvenile,"
the cop said after I had gotten done telling him of everything that had transpired in the shop. I hadn't realized how long we'd been in there. It only seemed like minutes. The sun was beginning to rise on the horizon. We stood at the edge of the alley, cautiously eyeing the shop. "Please, I swear it's true," I said and broke into tears. The cop finally gave in, and, reluctantly, I followed him to the shop. I wasn't going to go back inside. Not if I had to. Really had to. All I meant to do was point through the moss-covered window and show him the wreckage that we had caused. Perhaps he'd believe it then, real or not, Cindy was still inside. Peering in through the door, which slowly swung ajar, I saw down the red-lighted hall. All the shelves stood as if they had never toppled. There were no misshapen, flesh-wearing monsters in the shop. Only dust-ridden items were lying on shelves.
"Alright, you wait here."
"Call for backup first, please, sir. Please, you gotta help Cindy, but..." He shined the light in my face.
"You really think at 3 a.m. I got backup? Nothing happens in this town except for 2 young girls breaking into abandoned shops. And you best be here when I come back out."
He turned and sauntered through the doorway. I watched. I waited as he disappeared through the room into the expanse of shelves. He was gone for a while. Too long. "Sir?" I called to him. Biting my lip, I looked around the alley and stepped away from the door. I didn't want to look in there anymore, just in case something was waiting for me to come back. I kept my eyes on the door as a chilly October breeze caught the door and slammed it shut. My eyes went to the moss-covered windows where the familiar, life-size doll hung in the window. But there was something different about it now. It had a face. To my horror, Cindy's expression was stretched over his head in a grimace of pain. Caught in a scream with her mouth wide open. I stifled a cry as I tried to fathom what had happened to Cindy. But no answer made sense to me. No matter how loud I called out to the cop to come back, he never did. All I heard were whispers calling out, "We've been waiting for you."